thing, and then that's you in there, and you're making that decision to stand up and walk out or not. But this would not generate the experience of conscious will, says Wegner, and that's for different reasons that it's a bit difficult to go into right now. The way your brain's arranged, it wouldn't give you much of a conscious sense of who you are if you, all that was really you was that little spirit inside that little box in one part of your brain. I like to call it having your cake and eating it too. And I have this little cartoon from Richard Wright, and it's from a quote from Schopenhauer, and he said, you can do what you want, but you cannot will what you want. And will, he's using will in a different sense to what we're using today, don't be confused. But basically the idea is that you are not some little box inhabiting your brain that makes decisions. I think that's a poor view of human nature. I think you are your body and your brain, and I think that's a much richer view. I think that when you, as that complete unit, make a decision, on the one hand, we know you are, because you're a physical thing, and we're all physical beings. We're ultimately, in some sense, there's physical laws governing what we do. But on the other hand, that is us. That determines our beliefs and our desires and our ideas. We're not just this machine, or at least not some simple machine that we usually imagine, but we're much more complex than that. And that, I think, is where our kind of free will comes in. This is where I got annoyed with this article, because some people were concerned about the implications of and thought, because I think even the scientists like Wegner who write about this, they often have still stuck in this old thinking that there's this kind of free will box that determines who we are and how we act, and that's us, and outside it, because he did talk about the brain in that way. He said you inhabit a very complex brain. That was one of his words, and I don't think that's quite correct. You are an incredibly complex brain and person and mind. That is the difference. One of the reviewers were concerned about the implications of personal responsibility, and he wrote, I had to rant about this in a scientific journal. He's worried about whether the idea contradicts most contemporary religious thought, he says. Like, you're going up against most religions here. Is that a battle you want to fight, he says? As if that were relevant. That's been said before. Let's move on. I think there's a few minutes, not that far. So, the paper that I'm reviewing here, as you will have seen if you noticed it when we first started, I did announce it, it's called The Illusion of Conscious Will. And it's called that because Wegner thinks that not our ability to control and make our own decisions per se, but the way that we do it is an illusion. And remember, I was going back to what I said about thinking in your mind actively, okay, I'm going to get up and take a shower now, I'm going to get up, go out of the room now, whatever decision it is that you're making. That thought, we usually think, is the actual cause of us getting up and going out of the room or whatever. But there have been experiments to show that in some situations at least, when you have that kind of thought, you've actually already made the decision. It's already kind of gone over, they can see that. And so that kind of indicates that that thought that you have, I'm going to make this decision now, is not what causes your action. And so a lot of people, like that person that we just saw who was concerned about the religious implications, were afraid that it contradicts free will. I don't think it does, because I think if you view yourself, who you are, as your entire being rather than just this little free will box, you are still making the decisions. It's just that thought that you have at the end of the decision-making process, right, I'm going to go and do this, is not the actual cause of your decision and your action, even though you perceive it that way. And it makes sense, right, because I think we've talked about all of these different things that people can do when they think they're not in control, but they actually are. And in the end of the day, I think we have to say that somehow those people are still making a decision, even if they think they're not in it. And so we have to identify our actual decision-making process with something a little bit deeper than this conscious thought of our decisions. What I really admire about this approach is that it's quite empirical, and he really has identified something that is part of our experience, I think, often in terms of how we perceive ourselves making decisions. It's not quite right, but I guess it's not completely wrong either. I think there's one more slide to finish on, this one here. This is probably another fairly separate thing in his paper that was quite interesting. And he said that we have two separate rules, two separate ways of seeing things in the world, seeing causation, making inferences about things that are caused. If you've done any philosophy, you might know, or even if you haven't, you might know that you can never know 100% sure, at least in a, say, mathematical sense, that what the cause of an event. There's always another possibility that. So imagine a ball on a billiard table, and you see red ball roll towards green ball, which is not visible. It's blue ball, and then that rolls off in another direction after they hit. But there's always the possibility that, in fact, just before this ball was about to hit, there were a couple of bumps around the table, which happened to be at just the right trajectory to stop this moving, and then a split second later it started to stop moving, in just such a direction that it looked like that was caused. So again, we can never really know what the cause of something is. We can only look at a situation and kind of using common sense, using what we've built up, using our sense of the world, kind of guess what's going on. But Wegner says that we have two different rules for that. One for physical objects, like a ball going around the track. We don't say the ball's wanting to move down the track, we just say it kind of falls naturally. On the other hand, if we see a person playing with the device, a person moving around, we don't say that that's just happening out of natural law. We say there's some kind of agency there. And he thinks that there are two really fundamental different ways in our psychology of seeing things around us. And he thinks that we use exactly the same process to infer stuff about our own minds. Perhaps when we're making a decision and we have this conscious thought, okay, I'm going to go and do something, we're actually making the same kind of inference about our own mind as we might make about another person and what they're doing. And that's why it looks like to us we have this decision-making process going on that's conscious, when in fact we've kind of already made the decision. perhaps we infer causation in our own mind by the same process which we use to infer causation in agency, causal agency in others' minds. And I think that's something to remember. The actual causal path of our thought process from input to output, the way your brain works, it's extremely complex. You think about the way that your eyes work. There is not some video screen in the back of your head where your brain processes all the information that comes into your eyes. The information that comes into your eyes is cut up into different kinds of representations. You see an object and your brain's immediately cutting it down into the lines that you see to try and infer, okay, this is not just some random pattern of lights, but it's an object that kind of recedes into the distance in a certain way. It's maybe got light shining off it, that's why it has the colour that it does, or whatever. And you're not aware of all this processing that your brain's doing. One way to see this is to try and draw yourself, and unless you've had a little bit of training at drawing, you're probably going to be really crap. You think, well, why can't I just draw what I can see? Surely, but it's because there's a lot of complex stuff going on in our brains that helps us to work out how we decide, that builds up what we see. And the same thing, Wegner says, and I say, the same thing happens with our thought processes and our decision-making processes. There's all this going on, and all we see is this little thought at the end, and we infer to that thought, that decision, oh, that must be the cause of me actually stepping out, walking outside the room, whatever it is. In fact, that just happened to be caused by the same thing that caused us. And I'll finish that with another diagram because I think it's helpful. And what we imagine happening, what seems to us to happen, is that we think a thought, okay, I'm going to stand up, walk out and get a drink. And that leads to the action. You actually stand up, walk out and get a drink. But in fact, what I'd suggest happens is that you have a lot of prior reasoning going on in your brain. That is the actual cause of your action, going out to get a drink. It's also the actual cause of your conscious thought. I'm going to go and do this. At least that's the theory. That's all I have time for today. I think that's the main parts of what I had to say. A lot of cool people who had things to say, and I didn't